uh, short letter, 14 verses, but again, like 2 John, even though it's short, there's a lot that we can get out of this. So I do have 7 pages of notes here, so it's hard to believe. We got 7 pages of notes on 14 verses, but and could have did more. But let's just go ahead and get started. This is one of John's most personal letters. This is addressed to an individual that was personally known to John. The letter itself shares some similarities with 2 John in the fact that it addresses a problem at the local church. In 2 John, the problem in the local church is dealing with false prophets. But in 3 John, it's not a false prophet, but more of a Christian that is causing problems. And so this is what John's dealing with here. Now, in the last week's lessons, we were told not to show hospitality or open our homes to false teachers. But in this one, John actually commends people for being open and very hospitable, opening their houses and homes up to traveling teachers and missionaries. And but one of the things, in order for us to understand what they're talking about, both in 2 and 3 John, we've got to have a mental picture of what hospitality was like in the ancient times. Now, during this time, there was no Marriott's or Hilton's or Days Inn. Nobody left the light on for you. You know, those didn't exist. And the inns that did exist, they weren't exactly a place where you've got a private room, private bathroom, and a free continental breakfast. I've never understood the free continental breakfast when you're paying for everything. But, you know, and what the inns were, most of them were like, were they were generally attached to taverns, or people had empty rooms or had added small little dark rooms onto their houses so the travelers could stay. Most of the inns of that time period were pretty well bug-infested brothels. They had a very bad reputation. Bandits and stuff knew that people staying there were travelers and were pretty well on their own, and they would take advantage of that. A lot of the inns were attached to taverns, as what we know as beer joints. And so even the innkeepers were looked at as a lower class of people. And it was not their testimony was not even really taken seriously. And travel in that time period, all of us have traveled a good little bit. You know, some of us to foreign countries, at least down to the beach, different to the mountains. Rick was talking about going to the mountains this past recently. We're used to traveling. But in those days, travel was very harsh. And if you look in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, in verses 25 through 27, I'll read these right quick. Paul describes the perils he faced in his travels. And Paul did a lot of traveling. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. At night and a day I have been in the deep, in journeys often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weakness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. How many of us would want to travel with a review like that? No. Travel in that time period was hard. There was no jumping on a plane or getting in your car and going. Most people walked. They took ships. Ships in those days didn't have life jackets and lifeboats. It was very perilous. And when it come to accommodations, those were perilous. And because of this, hospitality was a necessity and a duty. John in these letters considers it to be a Christian's duty. Even in the pagan cultures of the time, hospitality was considered one of the highest virtues. And both the Old and New Testament have many examples of hospitality. I mean, you can go through there and look, and time again, people were opening up their homes to people, bringing them in to protect them. You remember in Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot, they were strangers. He brought them into his house instead of allowing them to sleep in the square to protect them. So hospitality was very high. It is considered a virtue. And if you travel to that part of the world, the hospitality there is second to none. I've seen it firsthand myself as we were walking in a Muslim country. These people would just open up their arms like, here, sit, and they would have kids bring tea and sugar and little cookies just to sit and talk with us. They treated us better in a Muslim country where you would think you would fear for your life, but these people were very generous and very open with their hospitality and opening up their homes to us American Christians. You would think they would be wanting to drag us off and shoot us, but no, these were the most nicest, sweetest people you'd ever meet. And be quite honest with you, I was treated better over there than I have seen in places in my own country. And that says something about the hospitality. Now, even though hospitality is a Christian duty, John in 2 John emphasizes there is a limit to that. And tells us not to compromise our beliefs, the truth, in showing love by the way of hospitality to false prophets, like we talked about last week. Jehovah's Witnesses, they pull up on your doorstep. It is okay. Shut the door. Tell them go. That is within the biblical truth. And that's what John was teaching. So let's go ahead and dive into the third epistle of John. We'll read the first 3 verses. The elder, to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. For I rejoiced greatly when brethren came and testified of the truth that is in you, just as you walk in the truth. Now, John begins this letter with a normal greeting. He identifies himself as the elder. We talked about that last week. This has nothing to do with his age, but it refers to his position in the church. Now, the letter is to a man named Gaius. Now, in the Bible, there are 3 other men named Gaius. We can see them in Acts 19 and 20, Romans, and 1 Corinthians. But the name Gaius is a very common name in Roman society, and there is no indication that this Gaius is one of those other 3. The way John's greeting flows would indicate that Gaius was a man that John personally knew, that he was friends with him. This was a very personal letter. Even though we're not given a whole lot of information about Gaius and who he was, he appears to be a very prominent member of a local church. But what is revealed about Gaius by this text concerns his character. Now let's talk about character for a minute. What is character? Character is defined as a strength of moral fiber. A.W. Tozer described character as the excellence of moral being. Now, as the excellence of gold is its purity, the excellence of art is its beauty, so the excellence of man is his character. Persons of character are noted for their honesty, their ethics, and their charity. But what does it mean to have character? Moral excellence and firmness earned through one's action. Character is a standard of excellence, an adherence to one's values and principles based on what you do each day. You can tell people you have values, but you cannot tell people you have character because you have to live it to earn it. Would you agree with that? Character is not, you can tell people, well, I've got good character, but really the proof is the way we live our life. Our life should show and will reflect the character that's within. Now, we see this expressed in the 3rd verse when John hears the testimony of others concerning Gaius. Now, these people that were testifying about Gaius were traveling preachers, missionaries, people that had come to the church. They may or may not have been sent by John himself. But when they got there, Gaius opened up his home, greeted them, took care of them. If they were missionaries on a missionary journey, Gaius would do whatever he could to help them in their journey. And so here's Gaius just doing what Gaius does, and people are testifying about his nature, who he is, talking about that he is not just a man of talk. He actually moves, acts upon what he believes. There's a lot of Christians that will tell you one thing and they'll do something else. Now, we'll get to verse 4. Verse 4 says, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Now, John's like any of us. He's tickled to death when he gets reports back that the people that he has taught, that he has witnessed to throughout the years are still walking in the faith. And as a teacher myself, and some of y'all can understand, it is no greater joy for me than a child that I taught when they were in youth come up and they're still in church. You know, there's one girl, she's married to a preacher, she works in the church. Quite a few of the children we taught in youth, me and Kathy, they're still involved in church. And it is a beautiful thing to see that our work was not done in vain. We all want to think that the work that we have done is making a mark. I actually talked to a young man some time back, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and we were talking, and he started sharing. He said, I had a teacher one time, a Sunday school teacher, told me this. He started quoting, and I remember I'm the Sunday school teacher that told him that. And it just made my heart just beam that something got in that youngin'. Some biblical truth that I had given him. Some truth of God, not me. But how many of us don't find joy when we see, the fruits of our labor? And that's the way John is here. He is joy to see these people still walking in faith. All right, let's look at verses 5 through 6. Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers, who have borne witness of your love before the church. If you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God, you do well. Now, here John commends Gaius for the hospitality that he's shown to others. We see in the New Testament many people are commended for their service. Aquila and Priscilla in Romans 16. Epaphroditus for ministering to Paul, even at a great risk to his life in Philippians 2. And the list goes on and on and on. This recommendation is a very high honor because it pays tribute not only to his service, but to his walk in the truth. Now, as Christians, I've heard many times people, I've gone to funerals and stuff and talked to people, and I've had people just almost in tears say, I wish I had told them how much they meant to me, how they affected my life. And I can't, for the life of me, figure out why we're not telling people this as we go through life. The people that have meant so much to us, why do we wait till it's too late and have a regret? Is it not the job of the church to edify, build up one another? Should we not, when somebody means something, does something that just touches our heart, should we not commend them for that, praise them for that? I am so grateful that y'all heard me talk about a lady by the name of Miss Eula, a great Sunday school teacher. And I had seen her after many years, and I actually went up to her and I said, Miss Eula, I want to thank you. I said, what you taught in your Sunday school class really touched my heart. And we were preparing to go on a mission journey. I said, because of you and so many like you, I am able to do this. And she just smiled because she understood that her work, what seemed just a Sunday school teacher, that seemed so many people overlooked the value of the Sunday school teacher, had an impact not only on my life, but because it impacted my life, it was going to impact other people's lives. Why are we not encouraging one another? That is what we need to be doing, edifying, building each other up. And that's what John is doing with Gaius. He is telling him, commending him, not just trying to puff him up, but encouraging him to continue on this path. You are doing well. You are making a difference. Now, verses 7 and 8. Because they went forth for his name's sake, taking nothing from the Gentiles. We therefore ought to receive such that we may have become fellow workers for the truth. Now, John encourages this godly man to continue doing what he's doing, loving those traveling preachers and missionaries as they arrive. John tells him that when he does that, he is a fellow helper in the truth. Now, for every missionary, every mission trip that I have been able to go on, I was on the field. I was out there touching people in a foreign land or in another state. But at my home church, there was 40, 50 people that were praying for us each day. They were people that helped supply our needs. Last time we went to Guatemala, there was a lady that got up at 3:30 in the morning to drive the church van to the Charlotte airport so that we could have a ride up there and not have to leave a car in a parking lot or a couple of cars in a parking lot. And you know what? When we flew back in, she was there in that van. Every good deed that we did on the mission field, she was part of. Every work that we did down in Guatemala, there's a whole bunch of people at Unity Baptist Church that took part in that. Now, most of you, we've all seen the firemen on TV, right? Oh, you see them. They're putting out the fire, rescuing the victims and everything else. What you don't see that allows the firemen to make those rescues and put out that fire are those dozens of men and women that are behind the scenes. Those that are purchasing the equipment, those that are repairing the equipment, those that are testing the equipment, making sure that we have the best, the training officers that are training the firefighters. They're not making rescues. We're the ones that's on TV making the rescues, cutting people out of cars. But we cannot do that job without them. So even though we make the rescues, they get credit for it too. And that's the way it is in the church. Even though some of us cannot physically do the work of going on these mission trips and building churches or working with people in a foreign country, we still can be a part of that work by supporting our missionaries and doing the work that God has called us to do. We are still a part of it. The church is not just one person. The church is not just one congregation. Right now, this church is part of a whole group of Southern Baptist churches here in this city, whose task is to reach the lost of this city. And we need to work together. That's why we have the association, so that small congregations like us can work with other small congregations and do the work that God has called us to do. Back in my hometown, my home church this summer, the congregation we come from is no bigger than this one, or not much bigger than this one. And all the churches in this town are the same size. But it was funny, they decided, God laid it upon one girl's heart, that, hey, we should pull all the churches together to do book bags and school supplies for the kids in the town. And so they sent out letters, and all the churches worked together. And on one Saturday, there was 300 nice book bags that were nicely equipped to prepare children to go back to school, if they were going to have school. It was the Methodist, the Baptist, the Church of God, the AME Zion. All these small congregations working together for a common cause that God had laid on the heart. And on that day, oh, what a day, they called the fire department and said, the fire department, will y'all come up here and direct traffic? You know what? We were there. I was sitting up on one corner in a brush truck, directing traffic. We are called Because we have one God, we have one Savior, and we all need to be working together for the same goal. And it was a beautiful sight to see all these churches in our little bitty town of 350 people come together. We are not independent. We may be autonomous, but we are not independent. We have brothers and sisters in this war. Verse 9 and 10. I wrote to the church about, I pronounced that word 500 times today, Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, does not receive us. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words. And not content with that, he himself does not receive the brethren, and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. Now, here we introduce to Diotrephes. Now, in 2 John, talked about false prophets. Nowhere does it say that Diotrephes is a false prophet. And exactly what he is, he may be the pastor of the church. He may be a very influential member of the church. But what we see here is a Christian that has allowed pride to get into his life. And it affects his characters. Whereas with Gaius, we saw a man of great Christian character. Here we see a man who, wanting preeminence of himself, people to look at him, to be the center of attention, to run things, he has allowed pride into his life. Now, when a Christian gets ensnared into one of these traps, the traps of pride, lust, or whatever, it will change them. Their relationship with God, they put God further away, and you will start seeing a Christian that you once thought was such a great Christian, all of a sudden acting very un-Christ-like. You remember Jimmy Swaggart? Great man of God, sang, we used to watch him on TV when we first got married. But then, he got ensnared with lust, did he not? And he started acting a lot different. And he lost his ministry. And that's what's happening here with Diotrephes. He has allowed pride to come in. And as the pride has come in, he gets more and more protective of the church. It's like, it's my church. Have you ever been in a church where people thought the church belonged to them? That it was all about them? That the only people that were going to come in here were the people they say could come in there. They had to dress a certain way, had to act a certain way, the music had to be a certain way. It was all about them. This is who Diotrephes is. He did not want John and these traveling preachers, because maybe some of these traveling preachers were better preachers than him. Certain amount of insecurity. So make sure that a better man or a better preacher or a better orator didn't get up in his pulpit. He didn't want them coming. So he shut down the hospitality. And if anybody in the church opened up their homes, he would put them out of the church. Is that very Christ-like? Now, if we've got a problem in the church, there is a right way to go about it long before, a lot of steps you've got to go through before you put somebody out of the church. And all of that is listed in the Bible on how to deal with internal conflict, how to deal with a brother that has turned his back against God, that is doing something that he shouldn't be doing. Now Diotrephes attacked John, malicious, telling stories on him, lies. Now, John doesn't go into detail on how to deal with people like this, but Matthew 18 does. And, it gives us the correct manner to go about dealing with a wayward Christian. John simply states that he will deal with him when he comes to the church, because John has planned to come to the church. Now, one thing about John had no fear of confronting Diotrephes. Too many churches right now have allowed people that are Christians that are causing problems in the church. Well, I don't want to cause a ruckus. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. John didn't have no problem confronting them. It's sad when you have to confront people, but you know what? For the sake of the church, the sake of the calling that we have, when we have an individual that is causing trouble or living a lifestyle and being in leadership, that the two don't go together, we have an obligation to follow Matthew 18 and deal head on with the problem. Too many of us just want to, ignore it and hope it'll go away. No, it ain't our job to ignore problems. It is our job to deal with them. It is not an easy job to be a Christian. We are called to a very high standard. God has laid on us a very high standard on the way we are to live and the way we are to operate His church. Now, if I get up here teaching a false doctrine, I expect the deacons, I demand that the deacons address it and not shy away, hint around it. No, come straight into my office and say, brother, bring somebody with you. That's according to the Bible. We got a problem. You're teaching a false doctrine. Deal with it. Because, I'll be quite honest with you, I've been a fighter my whole life. If somebody gets out of hand, I'm not afraid. I might not like confrontation. But if my chairman of deacons run around on his wife, guess what? I'm going to be knocking on his door. I'm going to confront him. He may get mad at me, may spit at me, may threaten me. But because I love him and his family, guess what? I'm going to call you out on it. In a biblical manner. Not to ruin you, not to try to put you out of the church, but get you to repent. We are to be our brother's keepers. And I know that sounds harsh, but this is what the Bible says. And if you find fault in what I've said, show it to me in the Bible. Show it to me. We should not run. We were not called to run. We were not called to cower down. We were called to do what we're called to do. And the standard that God has placed upon the Christian life is very high. And we need to push toward that goal. All right. What was that? Okay. 11 and 12. Beloved, I do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. He who does good is of God, but he who does evil has not seen God. There is if we're living poorly, guess what? That reflects our relationship to God. Our actions actually reflect what we believe. That is what character is. Living what we believe. If we're content to go out here and cuss a waitress out who got our order wrong, what does that say about our faith in Jesus Christ? Doesn't say a lot, does it? Does it say that you're a Christian? Technically, people should be able to tell you're a Christian by the way you live. We look right now at the news. I don't know how much y'all read. I don't watch the news. I can't stand to watch it. I don't mind reading it. And I read a lot of news, but I cannot and I will not watch the evening news. It just annoys me to no end. It just gets me. But the way they're treating this Supreme Court nominee. Now, you look at the ones that are questioning her, asking her, have you ever raped anybody? What kind of stupid question is that? And have you seen her poise? Which one of them do you believe is a Christian without knowing their background? Yeah, the Supreme Court nominee. Just by her actions. They have not been able to fluster her. They have not been able to just get under her skin and make her start screaming at them the way they do. Her actions are proof of her faith. Now, verse 12, John mentions the name of another good man by the name Demetrius. Again, this man demonstrated the true character of a Christian. That not only were there a good testimony coming from other people, but when his life and actions are compared to the Word of God, showed him to be a true believer. Now, there's not a lot known about Demetrius. Demetrius was a very common name in Rome. It meant the son of Demeus, a goddess. So it's a very common name. And so we don't have a lot, but again, we see his character. We see the testimonies of others about what kind of Christian he was. Not his testimony, but the testimony of others. That here was another good Christian man. Now, we've got to ask ourselves, when we compare our actions, when we take a serious look at ourselves, how are our actions, the way we live our life, holding up against the teachings found in the Bible? Will we be judged as a true follower of Christ, or will we be judged to be, one of the world's favorite words, a hypocrite? Somebody that talks the talk but don't walk the walk. And nobody can answer that question but you. And we all need to really take a look at our lives and see, is our talk matching up with our actions? What is our character? What is the character that visitors, when they come to this church, what are they seeing? I had a preacher buddy, that he talked about, he said, church out there on the side. Real friendly church. And walk in there and nobody talk to him. What does that say? They're just a sign. If you have to tell somebody how great you are, you're not. If you have to sit there and cover your car in fish emblems and tell the world that you're a Christian, and they can't figure it out just by the way you treat other people, you're probably not. So we all need to take a serious look at our lives and see if our actions are lining up with our words. Now, verses 13 and 14, John closes his letter that there's more he would like to say, but desires to do it in person. John has a desire to come to this church. John is an old man, and he's going to, travel in those days was tough. Most people didn't have horses. They may have had a donkey. Otherwise, you were going to walk if it was on land. But John desired to come to that church, to help them. That's all I have on 3 John, and we did pretty good. I was scared we weren't going to get through all 14 verses. But anybody got any questions, any concerns, any corrections they want to make to me? And don't be afraid to talk. And generally, I like teaching on Wednesday night where we just sit around the table. If we knew we were just going to have this many, we'd set a table out and we'd just start round tabling.